right, hello everybody, and welcome to the first webinar of this year. And what we will be talking about today is the top strategies for developing learning to learn. Learning to learn skills in the primary classroom. The first thing I would like to ask you is whether you can see all the buttons on your display. So this is a hands up button and the question mark, and I will ask you to press the hands up button if you can see me, you can hear me, and you can see the screen. So three things. You can see me, you can hear me, and you can see the screen. And I will be checking that. All right, I've got a lot of hands up. Great. So looks like we don't have technical issues. Wonderful. Oh, and you see how to use the question mark button. That's great. Fine. So I am not sure I will be able to read all the questions throughout the webinar, but I will definitely look through them when it's the end of the webinar and we will have a Q&A slot. And let's move to the next slide. That's certificates. You will receive all the certificates automatically in the thank you letter within a few days after the webinar. Somebody will receive their certificate maybe an hour after the webinar. Somebody will receive it at once. Some of the people might receive it in a week. And make sure to check the junk mailbox, because sometimes the platform sends them out there. Certificates are generated automatically. So if you, when registering, typed in your name in the wrong way, unfortunately, I won't be able to change that, because it's about the platform and all the process is automized. So be careful when you register next time, and make sure you are registering with your current email address. And we're moving on. So we will discuss today what is life competency in general, and what life competencies are there. What is learning to learn as the life competency? What does it consist of? And some practical guidelines for teachers to teach learning to learn competencies. And of course, we will look at how it works in a primary classroom with the primary books. So what is life competency? According to Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies, it's a three-dimensional notion, and it consists of breadth, development, and depth. And here it means that in breadth, we mean that there is a complete view of transferable skills within one system. I will show you later how it works, but for example, if we're talking about learning to learn, there will be learning to learn area, and within this area there are three other core areas. One of them, and all of them are transferable. That means that if we are talking about learning to learn in primary classroom, the area will be the same in secondary classroom. For example, it might be taking control of own learning. So this is a transferable skill. Development, it's how the skills develop across the stages of learning journey, starting from pre-primary and finishing with at work. And by depth, we mean that there are details, or we call them descriptors, or they can be called can-do statements that help us understand how exactly it works on each stage and how exactly we can assess learners on each stage, what we can demand. And yeah, talking about stages, the stages described in the Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies are pre-primary, primary, secondary, higher education, and at-work stage. And within each stage, there are these competencies and also foundation level described. So there are 6 competencies within excuse me. Okay, there are 6 competencies. It's critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, collaboration, learning to learn, and social responsibilities. If we're talking about foundation level, it's emotional development that goes through each of the competencies that are here in purple squares. Digital literacy, which also is required throughout the whole learning process nowadays, and okay, sorry for that. Yes, somebody has some problems, technical problems. Okay, sorry, I'll check it. All right, looks like it's okay. Fine. So hide it for a while. Yeah, and the last point in foundation level, it's discipline knowledge. So all of these skills are should be developed at each lesson, not only English. And you will get some tips that you might apply for any other lesson. So discipline knowledge is some area where we should develop all of other skills, and they are transferable not only throughout the each stage of learning, but also they are transferable from one professional area to another, or one learning area to another. All right. What exactly competencies consist of? So within the competency, what we mean is that there is knowledge about what we need to do to reach the results. There are skills. This is the level of mastery we need to have to reach these results. And attitudes, it's about positive mindset about the subject we are learning, and about the work we are doing. And how does the Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies work? So we will be talking about competency, and we have learning to learn competency. Then we will see what it consists of, 3 core areas, and which can-do statements are there just for primary classroom. So what is learning to learn life competency? You can see a picture here. There is a lady saying, I see you did well in school, but what real world skills do you have? Tests. I can do tests. And I think you can apply this picture to any life competency, but still, very often students graduate from the universities, and they actually start learning something when they start working. They start adapting when they start working. And it's important to give our students the skills that they can apply at once, that they don't have to learn how to communicate with people or which skills to master in order to search information or something like that. So we need to teach our students the skills that they can apply not only for our subject, which is important, but it's more important how they feel about the subject and how they can learn it further without too much of our guidance, and how they can autonomously work in this subject. And the aim of the education has to focus not only on the output of learning, but also on the process itself. What does the learning to learn competency consist of? It consists of 3 core areas, which are practical skills for participating in learning, taking control of own learning, and reflecting on and evaluating own learning success. And here we have competency and 3 core areas. What exactly we mean by practical skills for participating in learning? This includes such skills as the ability to make notes, store information and retrieve information when it's needed, for example. And this is the area which should be developed autonomously, which should go from teachers' guidance to students' autonomy. Taking control of own learning, it means that, for example, ability to ask for help can be in this core area. And there are more skills. I will talk about them at the next slide. I mean, more can-do statements. I will talk about them at the next slide. But what is important to tell about taking control of own learning is that it's all about self-regulatory strategies and the ability to keep motivation and to stay focused on the task and to understand that this will lead me as a student, this will lead me to better results. And also taking control of own learning means that students will need to understand what is their learning goal. Okay, I've got a lot of questions all of a sudden. Excuse me. I'll check if there's something urgent. All right. Unfortunately, I cannot influence on the connection. Maybe make sure that, okay. Make sure that you are listening to the webinar with good internet. That's all I can say. Unfortunately, I'm not in charge of this part. If you have problems with the sound, okay, okay, everybody can hear me. Good. Good. Sorry, I will, from time to time, I will interrupt all right, to see whether everything is all right on my side with the technical side of the webinar. All right, so you can see that there are 3 areas. And we said that practical skills as making notes, storing, retrieving information. It's about this first core area. The second one, taking control of own learning in order to achieve better results, and reflecting on and evaluating own learning success. This involves learners reflecting on their own learning in order to understand what works for them and what doesn't work for them, which learning strategy to choose and which learning strategy they can develop according to their own style of learning. So this is reflecting on their learning helps them master their own learning techniques and their own learning strategies, combine those they've learned with what really works for them. And yeah, this is what it is about. Let's look at it a little bit closer. So we've got competency for primary students, which is learning to learn. We've got core area with practical skills for participating in learning, one of the 3. And there are specific can-do statements what students need to develop throughout the whole process of learning in primary classroom. Okay, somebody says that there is no video. All right, I guess there is video. Can you see it? Okay, yeah, there is no chat. Unfortunately, this platform for webinars doesn't have the chat where everybody can talk with everybody. But you can ask me questions and I can answer your questions. All the certificate issues I will discuss at the end of the webinar, if you don't mind, so we don't interrupt for that. Great. Okay. I will continue. So, talking about can-do statements for developing practical skills for participating in learning. And here we go. A student by the end of primary classroom needs to learn how to complete tasks in class as required, joins in with learning activities with other children, searches for information on a specific topic when doing a project, takes basic notes about key information while reading and listening. And of course, you will tell me now that how can students do that when they cannot write? How can students do that in the first form when they don't understand a word in English? Well, we will talk about it a little bit later, that it's the can-do statements for the end of the fourth form. But what we need to do is to be patient and see how these core areas are being developed from the first grade till the end of the 4th grade. Okay, summarize this information on a selected topic when doing a project. Files information away, digitally or on paper, for future use. looks at pictures to help them follow a storyline, answers who, where, what, why, and how questions after listening to a sentence or short paragraph by the end of the fourth form, not only for English, when reading skills are not on that level, when they don't, when students don't know all the specific questions in the WH questions in English, but still, we are talking about comprehension after listening and reading, and produces short texts through participating in guided or shared writing activities. Let's move on to the next core area within learning to learn competency. This one is taking control of own learning. Here, students need to show awareness of their own progress in learning English by reflecting on what went well in the class, engages with practice activities in class, asks other children for help, corrects themselves after making a mistake. This is practicing control rather than controlled practice, as we used to think about in this three-dimensional model of presentation, practice, production. Yeah, what's important on the level of practice is to teach students rather practicing control and the ability to correct themselves and explain that this is not a mistake, this is a learning process. Memorizes and repeats keywords and phrases, employs practical skills for learning independently in completing a task. Oh, sorry for that. These are main can-do statements for taking control of own learning core area within the competency learning to learn. And the last one, reflecting on and evaluating own learning success. This one is something that that is difficult for us to switch to, because we are very used to grades, yeah, to grading students. But what we need to do is, first of all, teach students to reflect on their own and assess their own success, because for somebody, success would mean a different thing than for somebody else. And it's important to teach students, to guide students in this understanding what success is for them. So here, shows ability to think about how well they are learning English, and everybody will be different in this can-do statement, because for somebody, learning English is the ability. For most of people, most of people evaluate their ability to speak English by their ability to speak. But for primary students, it can be a song, yeah. And if they feel that they're successful in a song, they will be motivated and can go through other types of activities. Maybe I told this story before, but I had a student in the fifth form who wouldn't say a word in English. He couldn't even do the alphabet, and he didn't like English, of course, because he just couldn't do it. He said that there is no success. So we were looking for something where he thinks he is successful, and that was making like little statues from plasticine. So we worked individually for a while after the lessons, And we started making letters, English letters, out of plasticine, then making furniture and trying to label it and so on. So this is how we worked on the at least motivation, and this is how we worked on the ability of this kid to evaluate himself in a proper way, not only through somebody's evaluation, but on his own. And but by the end of the year, he he didn't start speaking English on the level of the 6th form, but at least he started learning English in his own pace and started participating in the classroom activities. Okay. Things about progress before asking the teacher about a task or activity. Listens and responds positively to feedback and understands why correction was given. Learns from mistakes and feedback. And again, I will repeat myself. It is important to explain the student that a mistake is not a wrong thing. This is a good thing during the learning process. Because for now, I work mostly with adult students whose attitude to a mistake is really negative, and the learning process is not the exam process. And it's important for us as teachers to reconcile that, and it's important for students to build this understanding that a mistake is good, because it gives us a chance to learn how not to do it next time. Listens attentively and resists distraction. This is something, again, that we need to master, and we can't demand it at once from students in the 1st grade. Regulates affective reactions like anxiety, disappointment, mood, or conflict with other children in project work, in group work, and so on. Ooh, sorry for that. So yeah, we were talking about reflecting on and evaluating own learning success. Let's move to some practical guide for teachers how to teach learning to learn competency. There is such a brochure, and you will receive a link to this brochure after the webinar in the thank you letter, and I will show you. It is important for teachers to maybe use this brochure while planning their lessons and checking what can-do statements they are developing at their lessons. Before we move on, I will just check whether everything is all right. Okay. Yeah, okay, this is not a book, this is a brochure which I will which I included into the thank you letter, and you will receive it. It's at the language research website, so you will find it there. If needed, you can send me an email, and I will send it again. Okay, we have a little stop here to answer the questions. First, very popular question here. Yes, there will be recording also included into your thank you letter. yeah, the video recording will be included in the thank you letter, and you will be able to listen to it once again. You don't have to take notes of everything, because everything I'm talking about you will be able to find in this brochure. Maybe not my own opinions and examples. All right. I hope I answered all those questions, and I will come back to the questions at the very end of the webinar. Fine, let's move on. So learning to learn, and there are brochures for all the life competencies, like learning to learn, critical thinking, creative thinking, and so on. When we are talking about learning to learn, there are some strategies on how to develop, how to master this competency in children, and it needs to be developed because it will be very important for them in such a fast-changing world. And it's not a straightforward process, of course, because it requires very careful scaffolding and a lot of opportunities for kids to practice, to use what they've learned, not only in language, not only in learning to learn, but in all other skills as well. And they will need to train and develop these competencies, because, as I said before, they are transferable. And teacher's role here is to guide students to this autonomy of learning, because one day they won't have a teacher, and they should need less and less guidance, starting from pre-primary and finishing with at work. At work, of course, guidance is good, but still, students who are not students anymore will need this autonomy. And the first thing what we can do is, as I was saying, use this brochure to see all the can-do statements I was showing you in that table. What we can do is first teach students how to familiarize with some new information. And familiarization is really important for a teacher as well, to learn those can-do statements, how they work. For example, as here, when we learn a new word, we think automatically, we think of a word itself, a word class, of pronunciation, definition, context, collocations, and other words in the same family. So I'm not talking now about primary students, I'm talking about how these can-do statements should work. All of them automatically. As here, yeah, when we learn something, we start from something very simple and move to step by step, move to something more complicated to see the whole picture. Monitoring while developing the learning to learn skills is crucial, because it's not only about language. Yet here we can see vocabulary. Student can pronounce and use the new vocabulary in the context. For example, in the topic animals. That's great, but it's not the only thing we need to monitor. It's also about each competency. For example, for learning to learn, shows ability to think about how well a student is learning English. This is about self-assessment of students. Rate of development, also a very important part, because we need to remember that learners will be developing skills over the course and their lives, and the skills they developed at any given age or stage will be used to build upon at later stages. So we need to be really patient about it. We need to scaffold and give students opportunities to practice as much as possible during the lessons, and take away this practice to their free time, and apply these skills not only to English but also to what they like doing at home. And you can see that the ability to this learning to learn is about building upon. Yeah, so if we start from a student can hold a pencil, it will move to a student can use a computer to learn, not just to use it to use. And also it is important, yeah, and I have a picture of how simple things move to more complicated things. And another picture stands for, this one, stands for us to understand that different students will acquire different skills in different paces. And it's important to be patient with all of them and not to demand everything at once. How exactly it works in a primary classroom? For example, through classroom routines, for starting a class, for carrying out the activities, for example, electing learners to be in charge of handing out or collecting worksheets or other learning tools, for transitioning between activities by using certain cues. What we can use is, for example, a chant, especially for starting a classroom. So learning to learn abilities are mostly developed through classroom management activities. The roll call activity, where we ask a name and a student says here, here, and I have this picture, a funny picture for you, but we can also change these activities to into some funny game, like when I call the name, a student has to do some specific movement, so include some drama, his special movement for today or something like that. It takes time, the time we need to fulfill the program of the Ministry of Education and Science that gives us all the new Ukrainian school standards. But we, as well, the new Ukrainian school standards say that we are in charge of building our program and our lesson the way we think is the most appropriate for this classroom, and we don't have to teach students to pass a test. This is something I showed you at the very beginning. We need to teach students to have life skills that they can use in future. We can also use a ball for different types of activities, or when we have a time limit for some specific project, we can use clocks like that, or when the time limit is, when the time is over, we can do some sound, and we can choose something specific for each activity that will mark the beginning, the end of some activity, the transition to some other activity. And yes, it is difficult to explain the instructions at the very beginning, and the instructions should be really simple. But once you explained it for like 3 weeks, it becomes automatic, and you can add, you can build upon it, and make the instructions more difficult and the activities more difficult as well. Reflecting on learning, and here what is important to say that this is the first grade, is just the beginning of their journey to become more autonomous, and the students, young learners, need to develop the reflective and the evaluative skills, and to monitor their progress in learning. Teachers can scaffold this development by providing some tools such as post-task self-feedback form, like you can see here. And it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be such a difficult question for the first grade. There can be some picture, and I have smiley faces that students color on their own. We don't give them a smiley face for a successful completion of some task, but we give them this feedback form where they mark their own success. And this is what we call self-assessment. They can have these post-task forms in a form of a board. When they go out from the classroom, they can stick something in front of their name, like I was a star today, or I was 3 stars today, or I was 10 stars today. And it's important to let our students do this on their own, to master their ability to objectively evaluate their own success. Okay, so developing familiarity with what is expected is really important. So at the beginning of the lesson, at the beginning of the course, we need to set goals for students. Throughout the whole process, we should set goals. It doesn't necessarily has to be in English, and it might be in Ukrainian, but students need to understand why they learn English in this specific age. Not because when they grow up, they will need to find a job and English is required everywhere. This is not realistic for young learners. But what is realistic, to participate in some project, to play some game, they need to learn these words, these structures. They need to talk to their friend, and to sing a song, they need to learn some words. To participate in a concert or something like that. So chunk the goals as well, and set realistic goals for students. And we will see now how learning to learn competency is being developed in Quick Minds, second level. And before we go to that, I will be showing examples from Quick Minds pupils book, activity book, and some supplementary materials like Super Puzzles book and posters. So this is an example of can-do sections in Quick Minds second level. And you can see here that can-do is about language, but we need to think about not only language, and ask students how well how successfully, and of course students will see when they are completing this activity, will see how well they learned the material throughout 8 lessons of the learning process within this topic, sports. So if they can say, I like playing football is fun, I like playing ping pong, playing ping pong is fun. If they can say it, if they can pronounce it, then you can give them some self-assessment form and ask them to fill it out, or not to print it out, to have a board in your classroom where students can assess each topic. Here, in a review section for the second form, students can also evaluate their listening abilities and see how well they understand English. And after this activity, what you can do is not only check what is correct, what is not, but also let students to evaluate their own progress, their own ability to listen, asking how well they were in this activity. And here, students as well check their understanding and check how successfully they've learned material in English. There are also project works, and in project work, students can evaluate their abilities in the most objective way, because projects are types of activities where students are not so concentrated on the language and on their mistakes, but they're concentrated on the task itself. And here we are mastering ability to measure something, yeah, and students can check their understanding of language, but at the same time be focused on the task. This is what we call immersive tasks, where the language becomes an instrument. And another one, sports poster. Let's check here which can-do statements we can use for this activity. For example, joins in with learning activities with other children. This is what we can evaluate within the students in project work. Searches for information on a specific topic while doing a project. Yeah, and here, or also we can say retrieves the information he learned or she learned in order to use it for some other result. Takes basic notes about key information while reading and listening. Might be here, but it's already not receiving information, but retrieving it. Summarizes information on a selected topic when doing a project. Yes. And what kind of core area am I talking about here? Is it practical skills for participating in learning? Is it taking control of their own learning, or is it reflecting on and evaluating on own learning success? Oh, the camera doesn't work again. Excuse me for that. Here I am. I will check now some answers. Okay. I don't get the answers. Reflecting, evaluating, reflecting, taking control. Okay, unfortunately, I have to tell you that this is practicing practical skills for participating in learning. And you, let's look at this. Oh, just 1 second. Technicality. So, joins in with learning activities with other children. This is about a skill to participate in learning. Summarizes information, takes notes, and so on. So this is just participating. Now, taking control of their own learning. Engages with practice activities in the class. asks other children for help. Yeah, the easiest one, can you give me a pencil, please? And this is something we need to teach our students at the very beginning. They don't know all the words yet, but we can chant it, like, can I borrow a pencil, please? Yeah, it can be like a song which we teach, and whenever they need something, especially in the project work, they can use it. Okay, employs practical skills for learning independently in completing a task. Again, for project work. And the last one, reflecting on and evaluating their own learning, shows ability to think about how well they are learning English. And when they are doing a project, they can look for some words in the topic sports, and somebody doesn't have to. Yeah, and then students can evaluate themselves, how well they've learned the topic, how they can label all the pictures they found for making the poster, if they have to look into the book, or they can remember it properly without a book. Thinks about progress before asking the teacher about a task, and regulates effective reactions. This is one of the most important evaluation skills within the project work. Regulates effective reactions. When something is happening, it's somewhere between learning to learn and emotional development. So this is what we can master in project work. Another example in evaluating their own progress is with the tasks that become more and more complicated. And this one is taken from Super Puzzles book. Yeah, the easy one, match a picture and a word. The more sophisticated activity to fill the to label the pictures, but in this scaffolded way. And this one requires critical thinking as well, but also students can reflect on how well they've learned the words, so they can see it. And you see that it's being more and more, it becomes more and more complicated and requires more and more life skills, as well as more and more life competencies, like critical thinking, and the last one, creative thinking. So students can evaluate not only their English, but their life skills as well. And what I wanted to mention today is that you as teachers really help us a lot to develop and to improve our materials. And how you do it, most of all, Cambridge Corner, where we can talk, you can ask your questions, and the next one will be on the 20th of January at 3:00 p.m. And you can join our live session on Facebook to ask, but before that you will need to ask a question. Where to ask this question? There will be a Google form, and I've included the link to this Google form in your thank you letter. So if you have questions which are not answered at this webinar, because we have just 5 minutes left, you can still do it in this contact form, and then join the live session to hear the answer to your question. And you can anytime join our campaign quick notes, where teachers ask me to design some resources, additional resources that they can download for free and use in the classroom, something interactive, something for each task in the activity book or pupils book for Quick Minds 1 and 2 for Ukraine. And what's more important is that we do listen to all the feedbacks you give us about the books, and we are trying to make each level better, more consistent, more appropriate for Ukrainian teachers. And we are working on the development of making the contemporary methodology and new Ukrainian school standards as close as possible. And what we've done is we've been listening to you throughout these years while you were teaching your kids with Quick Minds, and a lot of teachers had problems with reading, with mastering reading skills. That's why we include new sections in activity book, in activity book Quick Minds 1 for Ukraine, which is called Letters, and in Quick Minds 2 for Ukraine, we're including the section with developing reading skills. They will be available in summer, and we are working on these sections. Again, certificates. You will receive certificates automatically in the thank you letter within a few days after the webinar. Check your junk mailbox and make sure that you don't just send an email to me asking to send a certificate, because they are sent out automatically. We have 1 minute left. There will be a little poll. I will ask you to answer some questions. So the question is, which competency would you like to learn more about during the next webinar? So I will create the next webinar according to your needs. Please, those who are just listening to the webinar but doesn't have the possibility to watch the webinar, come back to the webinar page and just put a tick in a box which you are most interested in. You can also choose several answers. I guess you can choose 2. We've got 40% of people who voted. For now, communication is on the first place, creativity second, critical thinking first, critical thinking third, collaboration fourth, and emotional development is the last one. And we've got 50% of people voted. All right. Thank you very much. And I'm sharing the results so you can see them. Most probably we will talk about communication the next time. Okay, thank you. And now I'm moving to your questions to me. Okay, I've got a lot of thanks. Thank you for being such a great audience. Okay, thanks. A lot of thanks. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking part. the webinar. About certificates. Unfortunately, I cannot answer the question whether these certificates are counted as a part of your professional development qualifications. You will need to ask that in your local educational department, whether you can use it. I know that some teachers use that as an hour for their professional development qualification. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you. I've got a lot of thanks and no questions. Oh, will we have the ZNO webinar? Yes, we will, most probably in March. Okay, thank you for telling me that this webinar is useful. That's really important to know. All right, thanks very much. And I guess that's it. If I don't see any other questions, I will move on. These are my contact details. You will also receive them. Oh, how about study books for students who learn professionally, directed English art for dancers, musicians? What do you mean by that question, Tanya? There are Cambridge books for specific purposes, and if you're interested, you can email me. You can see the email address at the slide. You can email me, and I will tell you more what we have on specific purposes. We've got media, art, for IT and so on. So yeah. And again, ZNO, yes, we will have one. And if you're interested in ZNO preparation, you can also check the Linguist Training Center. They have loads of webinars for ZNO, and you can actually order training for this topic. And if you are interested in a seminar for your school, especially if it's in Kyiv, and sometimes twice a month, it can be another other cities. If you're interested in such kind of seminars in your school, you can email me and we can have it with you. All right. Will we have a webinar about using games in teaching grammar? Yeah, why not? Why not? We can have it. And actually, I've had 3 webinars like that. How to teach grammar to young learners through games, through different approaches, challenges and choices within teaching grammar. So if you are interested, you can go to our Facebook page and check the videos. But of course, you will not get the certificate this way if you just watch the video recording. But still, there are interesting ideas in these webinars. Okay, then I move to my thank you. Thank you very much for being such a great, responsive and active audience, and see you in a month.